You're not even real family. That's what Jason said to me the night before our father died. He didn't shout it. He didn't have to. He just stood there in the kitchen, arms crossed, voice like ice. You should be grateful Dad took you in. You were never meant to be part of this. I didn't say a word. I wanted to. God. I wanted to scream. But instead, I stood still, staring at the counter where we used to make pancakes as kids. The same counter where I once sat on a stool, legs swinging, while Dad taught me how to count change from his pocket. Jason always hated that. Said I got the soft version of Dad, the one who smiled more, who tried harder. Maybe he was right, or maybe he just never looked close enough. That night, I left without another word, drove back to my apartment, sat in the dark, and cried into a cup of cold tea, wondering if Jason would ever see me as more than a shadow in his legacy. I was the girl Dad raised after my mother died, the one whose name never quite fit on the family tree. They all treated me like a technicality, a footnote. And Jason made sure I never forgot it. I knew things were strained. I knew I was on the outside looking in. But I didn't know how deep the division ran until that moment. Then, the next morning, the call came. Dad was gone. Sudden heart failure. No warnings. No goodbyes. Just gone. Jason handled everything. The arrangements, the obituary, the church service. He didn't ask for my input. Didn't invite me to help. Just sent a cold group text with the funeral details and a note at the bottom. You can sit in the back. I almost didn't go. But something in me, something Dad put there, said I should, not for Jason, not for anyone else, but for the man who raised me. The man who saw me, even when no one else did. And what none of them knew was this Dad left one last thing behind, and it had my name on it. The funeral was exactly what I expected, sterile, performative, and curated to erase me. Jason stood at the front of the church like a politician, hands folded, voice heavy with grief, as he delivered a eulogy that made it sound like he and Dad had been inseparable. A true father, he said. A man of legacy, of blood. The word hung there a moment too long. I sat in the back, like I was told, third pew from the door, right behind the floral arrangements. No one greeted me. No one made space. I was furniture in their performance present, but never acknowledged. When the service ended, Jason shook hands like it was a campaign event. I watched him pose for photos with family friends, give scripted thanks to everyone who came. He didn't look at me once. I left early. Back in my car, I stared at the steering wheel until my fingers hurt from gripping it. It wasn't just grief. I felt it was displacement, like I had been cut from a story I'd helped write. At home, the voicemail light blinked on my answering machine. One message. I pressed play. Emma, this is Michael Langston. I'm your father's estate attorney. He asked me to reach out to you directly regarding his final arrangements and will... Please don't miss the reading. There's something he wanted you to have, something personal. I replayed the message 3 times. I hadn't even known Dad updated his will. Jason had certainly never mentioned it. I could already imagine the scene Jason sitting at the head of a long mahogany table, flanked by our uncles and their smug expectations, waiting to divvy up the estate like vultures. I wasn't supposed to be part of that room. Not in their eyes. But Dad had made sure I was... That night, I dug through an old shoebox of memories, birthday cards, faded Polaroids, and a letter Dad had written me the day I graduated college. You didn't come from me, Emma, but you came into my life exactly when I needed to be reminded what love could look like. I will never stop being proud to be your father. I hadn't read that letter in years. Now, I clutched it like armor, because whatever was waiting for me at the will reading, I knew one thing. Dad didn't forget me. Before Jason came into the picture, it was just me and Dad. He wasn't perfect. He overcooked pasta, couldn't fold laundry to save his life, and once glued 2 of my school projects together by accident, but he showed up every single day. I was 8 when he married Jason's mom. I remember standing stiff in a scratchy dress at their wedding, holding a paper ring I'd made for him the night before. He kept it in his wallet for years, said it reminded him what promises actually meant. Back then, it felt like we were starting a new chapter, a real family. But as Jason got older, something shifted. He didn't like sharing Dad's attention, didn't like how Dad called me kiddo or let me help build model ships on the weekend. He hated that Dad framed my report cards but barely commented on his baseball stats. Eventually, his bitterness became subtle cruelty, quiet jabs, backhanded compliments, reminders that I didn't really belong. At family dinners, when relatives praised Dad for raising someone who wasn't even his, I saw the flicker in his eyes, the weight those words carried. People meant well, but they always framed me as a charity case proof of Dad's kindness, not of my place in his life. He never corrected them, but he always squeezed my hand under the table. That was enough. Over the years, Dad taught me how to change a tire, balance a checkbook, fix a leaky faucet. Jason called it favoritism. I called it love. But when Mom left Jason's mom, my stepmother, it all fell apart. She packed up in the middle of a Tuesday and took Jason with her. They moved 2 towns over, and just like that, the family was broken in half. She said I wasn't her responsibility. Jason refused to see Dad for months. I stayed. I stayed while Dad got sick that first time. I stayed when bills piled up. I stayed when the business went under and we had to sell the old boat. And still, the family whispered like I was just temporary, a chapter that had overstayed its welcome. But Dad never treated me like a placeholder. He never once said stepdaughter, not once. He used to say, blood's just chemistry. Love is the real inheritance. I didn't know what he meant back then, but now I think I do. The room was colder than I expected. Not the temperature, just the tone. Walls lined with dark bookshelves. A grandfather clock ticking too loudly. And at the center, a long wooden table where Jason sat, arms folded, wearing the smug confidence of someone already counting his inheritance. I arrived quietly. No one acknowledged me. One of my uncles gave me a thin-lipped nod that didn't quite reach his eyes. The other barely glanced up from his phone. Jason didn't look at me at all. Michael Langston, Dad's estate lawyer, sat at the head of the table. His face was unreadable, though his eyes flicked toward me, briefly measuring, maybe even reassuring. He cleared his throat and opened the sealed folder in front of him. This is the last will and testament of David James Hayes, dated 8 months prior to his passing. He began, all parties with legal standing are present. The reading will now begin. Jason leaned back in his chair, casual and assured. His posture said, this is already mine. I could almost hear him thinking about which car he'd sell first, what office he'd remodel. Michael continued, voice even. First, to my extended family, my cousins, siblings, and old friends, I thank you for your presence in my life. I leave to you my good memories and my appreciation. Nothing more. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Jason rolled his eyes. Michael flipped to the next page, to Jason Hayes, my stepson. I leave the memories we shared in his younger years. I hope one day he understands that family is not proven by entitlement, but by loyalty. Jason's head snapped up. What he barked, that's it. Michael didn't flinch. There's more. Jason turned to me, jaw clenched. What is this? A joke. Michael continued reading, his tone calm but final. To my daughter, Emma Hayes, the one who never needed to prove her place, who stayed when it would have been easier to walk away. I leave the entirety of my estate, my home, my savings, my personal belongings, and full ownership of Hayes, home repairs, and the land attached to it. The silence in the room was immediate and absolute. Jason stood so fast his chair scraped against the hardwood. She's not real family. You can't be serious. Michael looked at him. I assure you, Mr. Hayes, this will is valid. Your father signed it in the presence of witnesses and recorded a video to confirm his wishes. He reached into a folder and produced a flash drive. Would you like to see it? Jason didn't answer. He just stared at me. Fury, confusion, and something else, fear. Because for the first time in his life, he realized he had no power here. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Michael inserted the flash drive into his laptop and turned the screen toward us. The video opened with Dad seated in his favorite chair, the plaid one, near the old bay window. He looked thinner than I remembered, tired but calm. His eyes were steady. If you're watching this, he began, then I'm no longer here. But I needed to say this myself, because paper doesn't always carry weight the way a voice can. Jason leaned forward, arms crossed. I stayed completely still. I've spent my life trying to do right by everyone, but if there's one thing I've learned, it's that being fair doesn't always mean being equal. Sometimes it means being honest. He took a breath. His hands trembled slightly in his lap. To Jason, he said, voice steady, I tried. I know your life hasn't been easy. I did what I could. But there were times I saw you choose resentment over connection. You pushed away not just me, but Emma. Jason scoffed under his breath. Michael gave him a look. Dad's voice continued, and Emma. You came into my life when I didn't know how to be a father. You taught me how to show up. You stayed when I was sick. You built the shelves in the garage with me. You let me be your dad even when others said I didn't have to be. My throat tightened. I wasn't prepared to hear it out loud. I wasn't prepared to be seen like that. I never needed blood to love you. You were mine the moment you called me Dad. That's why I'm leaving everything to you. Not because you asked, not because you expected it, but because you earned it in every quiet, unseen moment. The screen went black. No signature, no flourish. Just the truth, hanging heavy in the room like a second gravity. Jason shot up again, voice shaking. This is manipulation. You got to him when he was sick. He wasn't thinking clearly. Michael closed the laptop. There are medical records confirming Mr. Hayes was of sound mind at the time of the recording and the signing. The will is ironclad. You can't do this, Jason growled at me. You think you're something special because you guilted him into giving you everything. I finally stood, calm, clear, centered. You called me a footnote. I said, voice quiet but firm. Turns out, I was the only one he underlined. Jason froze. The rest of the room sat in silence, no one willing to defend him now. Michael slid the folder toward me. These are your keys. Miss Hayes, the house, the shop, the account transfers. It's all in order. I took the folder with both hands. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like validation. I looked once more at the people who had spent years making me feel small. They weren't speaking now. And for the first time in my life, their silence felt like peace. Jason didn't sit back down. He paced, hands gripping his hair, jaw flexing hard enough I thought he'd crack a tooth. The others, our uncles, a few cousins who'd lingered out of curiosity, shifted uncomfortably, waiting for someone to speak. No one did. I was his son. Jason snapped, turning on Michael. He raised me since I was 5. I earned that legacy. And now you're saying it all goes to her. Michael remained calm. I'm saying that's what your father chose. And it was entirely within his rights. You expect me to believe he left me nothing. Jason's voice cracked. More disbelief than rage now. Not the business. Not the house. Not even a photo, she gets it all. He turned toward me then, and his face anger, grief, fear, disbelief all swirled into something bitter and wounded. You manipulated him, he said, pointing at me like I'd pulled a trigger. You waited until he was dying and wrapped yourself around him like a leech. You fed him stories, poisoned his mind. No, I said softly. You did that all on your own. His mouth snapped shut. I stepped forward, not because I needed to make a scene, but because I needed to say it clearly. Finally, I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't beg for his attention or his money. I stayed. I helped. I loved him when he was too sick to finish sentences. You stayed gone until there was something to inherit. He didn't deny it. Jason's eyes darted to the others in the room, searching for someone to back him up, but no one moved. No one even met his gaze. Michael cleared his throat gently. If you wish to contest the will, Mr. Hayes, you're entitled to pursue it in court. But I should warn you there are multiple video records, signed affidavits, and a full psychiatric clearance confirming your father's mental capacity at the time of the signing. Jason didn't answer. He just stood there, chest heaving. And then, without a word, he grabbed his coat and stormed out, slamming the conference room door so hard a framed photo on the wall tilted sideways. No one chased after him. I stood there for another minute, hands still on the folder. The room was quiet. The weight had shifted. For years, I was the one on the outside looking in. Now I was the only one who had been truly seen. I didn't go home right away. Not to the apartment I'd been renting, not even to Dad's house, my house now. Instead, I drove. No destination, just highway and breath. I needed space to process what had just happened, what had shifted, because it didn't feel like winning. It felt like responsibility. The next morning, I stood outside the house I had spent most of my childhood in. The porch creaked the same. The mailbox still leaned slightly left. The front door stuck like always. Dad never got around to fixing that. The key turned smoothly. Inside, nothing had changed. The smell of sawdust and old leather lingered. His boots still rested near the back door. The living room bore the same uneven bookshelf we built together when I was 12. Back when I thought love could be measured in weekends and wood glue. And now it was mine. All of it. I walked room to room in silence, fingertips grazing the edge of each photo, each hand-drawn card I made that he'd pinned to the fridge and never took down. I could have sold it. I could have gutted the business and cashed out the assets. But as I stepped into his old office, blueprints scattered, coffee mug half faded, I knew I wouldn't. Because this wasn't just inheritance, it was legacy. That evening, I wrote a letter, just a short one. I placed it on the guest room dresser, Jason's old room. The door was closed. I hadn't touched it. You were right. I didn't come from him. But I stayed. And now, I get to decide who else does. If you ever figure out how to show up, really show up, then the door won't be locked. But I'm not waiting. I left it there, quietly, without fanfare. Then I turned off the hallway light and walked back to the part of the house that felt like home. 1 month later, the house felt different. Not because I changed anything. Most of Dad's things were still exactly where he left them. The leather chair near the window, the old chessboard we never finished, the photo of us at the county fair, taped crookedly to the fridge. I didn't need to redecorate. The space already carried his presence. But what had changed was the weight in the air. For the first time, it wasn't pressing down on me. It had lifted. I opened the shop again, Hayes Home Repairs. Not because I needed the income, but because it was his life's work. The locals remembered him fondly, and soon enough, clients came back. And when they asked where Jason was, I just said, he's not here. No explanation, no apology, just fact. The community, it turned out, had always known who the heart of this place was. And it wasn't the son with the title. It was the girl who stayed. I hosted a small gathering a few weeks later, a quiet tribute, not a formal memorial, but something more personal. I invited old friends, a few neighbors, and even the retired foreman who once worked alongside Dad when business was booming. We sat in the backyard under string lights, sharing stories, laughter, silence. I set his favorite chair at the head of the table, untouched. On the seat, I placed his dusty flannel jacket and a folded copy of the will. Someone asked if Jason was coming. I I shook my head. He said he didn't want to. And that was that. But later that night, when everyone had gone and the yard was quiet, I noticed something resting in the mailbox. A letter, no return address, inside, a torn sheet of notebook paper. Jason's handwriting slanted and stiff. I still don't understand why he chose you, but I think maybe I never tried to. I won't ask for anything. I just hope you don't hate me forever. I folded the note, placed it gently into the same shoebox where I kept Dad's old letter from my graduation day. Then I whispered aloud, to no one and everyone, I don't. That night, I lit a candle in the living room window. Not as a beacon, not as a peace offering, but as a reminder. That being chosen isn't about biology. It's about presence, about love that shows up again and again, even when it's inconvenient or invisible. Dad saw me, named me, trusted me. And when it came time to write the final line in his story, he wrote only one name, mine.